Here's a resource video to help you choose your first tarot deck. And I'm going to start by showing you the basic deck. This is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and you've probably seen it around. And this is how it used to look for many years. This is the sort of the bog standard version. And really, I think if you're the diligent student type, if you want to get everything right, if you want to learn tarot methodically and well, this is the one to start with. But it does come in lots of different editions. And, you know, for many years it looked like this and people got a bit bored with the colors. And then, you know, life in general became more curated, didn't it? And so as a result, if you don't like this very basic Rider-Waite-Smith style tarot, if you don't like the way it looks, there are lots of recolored versions of it, which actually, you know, keep the real template, but just change the coloring. Now, most of these I don't like. You know, the ones that came through, I don't know, in the 80s, 90s and noughties, the colors tended to be rather vulgar. But then they made a centenary edition, and I'll show you that. This is the centenary edition with a funny picture on the front. And this is the borderless version, which I don't really recommend, but this gives you a feeling for how they made the colors more tasteful, and it does look prettier, doesn't it? I think on the whole, I would advise you to get a tarot deck with borders. It just does something psychologically. It's somehow better to read. But these look very chic without borders, don't they? And so you can see that the yellows, which have been very much criticized, the yellows are calmed down. The blues are calmer. The whole thing is just a little bit more chic. And I mean, Pamela Colman-Smith was a good illustrator. She did this deck quite quickly, so it's not perfect. But it is, I think, a kind of prophetic book. I think it's extremely inspired, and I think it's really the best. I mean, I think it completely revolutionized tarot reading, and it offers a tarot vocabulary which I consider to be much more functional and much more sort of user-friendly in every way than the Marseille style decks. I'm assuming you've decided to get yourself an RWS, a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, or one of the decks that follows that tradition. This channel is not really about Marseille Tarot. The Centennial edition also comes in a tinned version here. Very nice too. And here, so that you can just see what it looks like with borders, this is a bridge size, not a mini. Bridge is in between full size and mini, and I actually like bridge size decks very much. But here you can see these muted colors with a border, and I think actually in a way that's ideal. You might want to learn with a full size version, and I believe the Centennial does come in a full size version with borders, and that would probably be my top recommendation for a beginner's deck. So you can see that's very nice. It's tasteful. The whites are slightly calmed down into a sort of off-white ivory color, and everything looks great. So for this serious, diligent, methodical tarot student, I think that's the best beginner deck. And incidentally, I think all of the decks that I'm talking about in this video I have given full reviews and full flip-throughs to on my channel. So find my playlist, my deck reviews playlist, and just find a full flip-through of any of these decks that you like the look of. Now, if you're going to go Rider-Waite-Smith, but you want to see some people of color, then this, the Melanated Classic Tarot, this is an indie deck. It won't be quite so easy to find online, but you know, you can track anything down these days, and I think it's still in print. And this is a recoloring of the Rider-Waite-Smith in which every face is black or brown. Now, these colours are a completely different proposition, aren't they? They're rather sort of sunny, either African or Jamaican. But here you have the brown skin. And I recommend this deck because it is, they say it's not a recoloring. They say it's a redrawing, but I think that might be a little bit, a little bit of a white lie. I think this is more or less traced onto the Rider-Waite-Smith, and then maybe, they've got a bit free with it, but you can see that the way the figures sit in the cards, where everything is placed, is really very precisely where Pamela had it. But, faces and heads and hands and hairdos have been changed, and the colours are very different. So, for a people of colour deck, I think that's really good. There was a time when I used it very much. It's very cheerful. It's a very summery deck, and it brings a whole different colour palette. And, I think it's all about what you feel comfortable with. I like these colours. I think they're very friendly. And I've done a full flip through of that as well. Now, not everybody likes the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and that's fine, and if you want something different, something with a different graphic design, there are hundreds or thousands to choose from. I've got some oddities in my collection, but in this video, I'm only going to show you decks which I think are pretty faithful to the Rider-Waite-Smith, because when you're starting out, you don't want to get confused. Pamela Colman Smith created a system, and her innovation was that the 36 pip cards, numbers 2 to 10 of the 4 suits, she illustrated. And that created a new tarot tradition. So I don't think it makes any sense to start with a deck that doesn't at least start from Pamela Colman Smith's template. There are decks out there that have sort of 35 of Pamela's pip card designs and then one which is completely different, and I cannot see the point of starting with a deck like that. There are many decks that have been designed in the last 10 or 20 years where you have about 30 cards based on Pamela's designs, and then 4 or 5 or 6 which just go completely their own way and make some sort of departure from the template. And again, I can't see how you could start with a deck like that. Start with a faithful RWS-based deck. Now, this is my first deck that I ever had, from back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and it's the Aquarian. Now, I'm allowing this a place in this video, and you can see this is an old copy. This is from 1980 or something. And so it's actually faded in a very charming way. It hasn't been, tinted. These borders are meant to be white, but they've gone off white over the years. And this deck for me has a lot of magic in it because it's my first deck. I was a teenager. I learnt the glories of tarot reading. What I want to say is it's just faithful, and it's a slightly borderline case, but I'm allowing it to be in the video because I think the spirit of it is very good. The pip cards, the numerical suit cards, are faithful to Pamela's designs. They take liberties. They are spatially a bit different. Nearly everything is a bit closer up. At least in the pip cards, everything's a bit closer up, which is really it's like a 1970s thing. I think this deck is designed in 79. There's a great tower card. What I want to say is that the major arcana cards are not actually terribly strict in terms of their esoteric imagery. Look, there's a star. The star traditionally is a nude woman pouring water from a jug, I believe. And there's a bird in the background, and in this case, the bird has become the central part of the design. Here, the sun, I mean, that's very nice, isn't it? It's very like 1970s Art Deco revival, but it doesn't really contain very much tarot symbolism. I don't think it matters that much that the major arcana are a bit free. What matters is the minor arcana give you Pamela's ideas. You get the Six of Pentacles, the guy with the scales. This is a generous person, he's going to give money. You get the four of Swords, someone lying down and resting. You get the choice between the Seven Cups in the Seven of Cups. You get the artisan in the Eight of Pentacles. I mean, the lady here she should have a hawk. It's not a hawk, but you know, you can learn with this deck, and it's very nice. I think the court cards are very nice. There's something peaceful about it. It's in the early days of the redesigning of the tarot. I mean, the tarot's been around since about 1420 or so that's a long time. But it was really like after the Second World War that people started to redesign it in any great quantity. The Aquarian Tarot comes in a tin, and I'll show you how it looks when it's clean and new. I like these tins, by the way. I think they're a laugh. But, you know, and then get the slightly smaller cards, a bit more manageable. They're not quite so well framed, are they? But, you know, that's life. And that's how it looks when it's been, you know, freshly minted, so to speak. Good stuff. I find the court cards very very gentle and nice. The whole atmosphere is gentle. It's very unthreatening. And I think that might be a really good thing when you're starting out, because there can be some stresses and anxieties when you're learning about divination, and when you're learning to think of it as a non-spooky, non-threatening thing. So to have this rather peaceful, elegant deck with these slightly blank but rather serene faces, I think is quite good. There's a death and there's a devil. So yeah, the Aquarian deck, it is on my recommendation list, even though the major arcana cards are not perfect in their symbolism. When you're doing your learning, when you're learning your meanings, you might want to refer to the RWS, or you might want to refer to a Marseille deck, so that you know what the major arcana cards are traditionally meant to look like. Now I'm going to show you a more modern deck. This is called the Golden Art Nouveau deck, and it's by an Italian designer called Giulia Massaglia. And I'm looking for the date here. The little white book is somewhere in a drawer, can't find it. I believe this is 21st century. The designer is living and working and posting on Instagram, so this is quite current stuff. Now what you get with this deck is an elegant redrawing of the Rider-Waite Smith. So if you're someone who needs things to look good and look elegant, this might be the one for you. You know, you can see this is a very able tarot designer. These designs are more accurate in a sense than the one we just looked at, the Aquarian deck. Here, for example, is the lady of the Nine of Coins. She's got a hawk. These things are actually important with Pamela Colman Smith's designs, because Pamela Colman Smith was one of those highly intuitive brains, and everything she puts in her designs is very suggestive. The hawk, for example, is an animal that will bring you stuff. The hawk hunts, doesn't it? So if you have a hawk, the hawk can go and hunt for an animal, for prey, for game, and bring it back to you for your dinner. So the lady in the Nine of Coins, not only is she affluent, but she possesses things that can maintain her affluence and can make her richer. So the Nine of Coins is a sort of a doubly affluent card. You're up and running and you have the resources to remain up and running and to remain secure, okay? And these things really matter in Pamela Common-Smith's designs, which is why it's really great to start with a tarot that is faithful. And this tarot is faithful. For example, here, we've got the lady and she is tied up. She's blindfolded. You see the city in the background. She has been cast out. You see the mud. She is in the mud. You know, these images have real meaning. She's in a red dress. What does that mean? This is a very complex symbol, the Eight of Swords, even though it can be read at the most simple level. But Pamela Common-Smith's elements are all there. The aces are already great in this deck. You might find this deck is a bit busy. I find it a bit busy. Let me show you what I mean. Both the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Aquarian have quite a lot of empty space in them, don't they? Look. There's room for things to breathe in the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's a bit like hieroglyphics, isn't it? It's a bit like an alphabet. Whereas sometimes when more modern designers redesign the deck, the canvas can become a bit full. Now, the Aquarian didn't really do that. It left you with some empty space. Look, there's empty space, there's empty space. And frankly, when you're opening yourself up to intuitive messages, when you're letting your brain do that kind of work, it's quite nice to have an uncluttered card to look at. And I think that is a major consideration, okay? So when we're looking at these Julia Massalia designs, you know, she's got a lot of gold in the background. Can you see that? So the deck itself has a very positive message. It feels like a deck of prosperity and hope. I mean, we all like a bit of gold, don't we? I certainly do, ladies and gentlemen. But the canvases, the frames are all full up to the brim with information. And the bits that might not be full have been filled up with this gold trellis work. So visually, it's not the most restful deck, but it is one of the most elegant ones. I'm now going to show you an interesting oddity. It's from the 2020s. It's a French designed deck. It's called Le Tarot de Marseille-Waite. And it's really sort of aimed at an Anglo-French market. It's got a little white book in French and English, okay? So no problems with language there. It comes in a nice box and it's not expensive. Now these cards, they only come in full tarot size. What this deck has done is it's redrawn the Rider-Waite-Smith, but in a really quite super retro style. So it's gone back to the style of the High Middle Ages, which is ironic really, because the tarot itself, even the earliest tarot decks, are not from the Middle Ages, they're from the Renaissance. So this one plunges back into the past and gives us designs in that slightly naive Middle Ages way. what this does is it gives you some of the major arcana cards which are more in the design, more in the tradition of the Marseille, pre-Pamela Coleman Smith. And this is nice because, you know, some of Pamela Coleman Smith's designs for the major arcana are not completely felicitous. So if you are a medievalist, if you like things to look really nice and old, then this is a really old looking tarot. There, that emperor is very Marseille style emperor. It's very mixed. I mean, that's definitely a Pamela Coleman Smith style 8 of battens. The colours are a little bit dark for my taste, a little bit muddy, but I think it's a very sweet project. And if it appeals to you, there's a very nice lover's card, then knock yourself out. I think it's a very solid production, and all the cards have all the symbolism you need to successfully learn how to read the tarot. Okay. And again, there's a full flip through of that on my channel. Now, we're going to go off into a slightly different direction. I've got 2 or 3 more to show you. I've got 2 more to show you, and let's go in a jolly direction now. This is the Gummi Bears Tarot, and it's out of print, but it was always cheap and cheerful, and you can pick this up on eBay if you want. So this is a tarot for people who need things to be light, and that is not a bad, I mean, there's no shame in that, because again, I think divination should be positive, should be a positive thing. And if you're someone who wants things to be light, then have things light. In this one, they're all kind of gummy bears, aren't they? So you've got Pamela Coleman Smith's designs reduced to funny little cartoon jelly baby bear things. And, you know, you've got good, strong primary colors. The cards are small, they're hand size, they're sort of bridge size, I suppose. Slightly smaller than bridge size. And they do the job. And I have to confess, even though I'm a highly sophisticated tarot reader with my own channel, ladies and gentlemen, you might occasionally catch me reading with this deck. You know, maybe it's a really gloomy day or something, or maybe I'm feeling a bit crap and I just don't want to be bothered with doomy images. And so I might crack open the Gummi Bears Tarot. So yeah, I think you can get this quite easily on eBay or secondhand somewhere else. And if you're tempted, then snaffle up a deck. It is out of print, and one day it's going to be a collector's item, and I think it's rather good. Oh, I remember there is one other I'm going to show you in terms of light decks while we're on the subject. This is the Hanson-Roberts deck, which I was fascinated by for many years because it's kitschy, and I'm a sort of connoisseur of kitschy things. I eventually got it, and I don't read with it. I'm not quite sure how to put this. I find it a little bit too on the sentimental, sugary, kitschy side for my taste. But I'm not kind of wholly against it. I think that tarot is a folk art. I mean, this is very hobbity, isn't it? I think it must be from, you know, the previous century, the 20th century. And if tarot was a folk art, then there's no reason why tarot should be just terribly curated and terribly chic. You know, if it wants to be sentimental and sugary and hobbity, then I think it can. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, the reason why this is in this video is that The images, again, they are relatively faithful to Pamela Coleman Smith's images. You've got here the lady with the tied up with the swords. Even the color of the dress is sort of right, and you've got the city in the background. Here, Eight of Cups, you've got the Wanderer, you've got the Eight Cups, the back is turned, the moon is out. In fact, it's a kind of eclipse. And here, Seven of Swords, you've got the sneaky guy stealing the swords. The Queen of Pentacles, you've got the rabbit that Pamela had. So, I mean, the faces are a bit, again, sentimental. I don't want to slag it off. I find them too sentimental for me. And I find it a bit jarring because, I suppose because I'm just too cynical. And I don't love the design. I find these cartouches, if that's the word, these scrolls, I find them a bit much. And look, Wheel of Fortune, it's got two of them. So I'm not sure that all the graphic design solutions are as good as they could be, but some of the colours are lovely. Lovely colours there. Chariot there, lovely colours there. It's dreamlike, and it's sort of optimistic and golden, and you feel that without being, I mean, it is soppy, but it's not so soppy that the whole design has broken down. There are modern decks which are so soppy that you don't even get the symbolism that you should get in the cards, because everything has just dissolved into a sort of soup of sentimentality or woo-woo, okay? So that is actually a relatively accurate, readable deck that you could start with if that was your tasse de thé, ladies and gentlemen. So that deck just managed to slip into this video, ladies and gentlemen, even though I don't read with it myself because I find it a bit much, but there's no reason why, if you like it, you shouldn't learn with it. Now, I think I've got one more. Have I got one more? Yeah. And this is an interesting wild card. It's a redrawing. This is the Albano Waite. It's a redrawing of the Rider-Waite Smith from the 60s, actually, when the tarot was having its big revival. And it was recolored by a mysterious person called Frankie Albano, who released one pop record, I think, recolored the tarot, and then disappeared off the radar and was never heard of again. So what you get with this is you get the slightly crazy color sense, an uncompromising color sense of the 1960s. It's kind of tasteful and kind of not. And if you are sort of locked into using the Rider-Waite Smith, the real original Rider-Waite Smith, this is quite a nice one to have in your collection, because it's an opportunity to look at different colors and freshen up your reading experience. I mean, that's a nice bit of purple there, isn't it? These, if you get these, the originals of these, which are now very expensive secondhand, the colors are even better. With this reissue, which I think is from US Game System, the lines, the black and white lines, are a bit inky, and the whole thing is not quite as clear. I've got a mini version of this from the 60s, and it's a bit prettier. But to experience these rather mad color combinations, rather mad color choices, it's a nice one to have in your collection, and you could totally learn tarot with this one. That's quite a hot recommendation, and if you have this one, people will say to you, "Ooh, where did you get that? That's rather interesting." Because it's got that mad old feel to it, hasn't it? And it's got history. It's got the 60s, and it's got the madness in the colors. I think that's enough information if you're starting out. My aim was only to show you decks which will give you a sort of a solid foundation for tarot. Good luck with your tarot reading. Keep it simple. Don't read any silly gaslighting books that make everything out to be super, super, super complicated, because it shouldn't be. Trust your instincts, enjoy it, and you'll be fine. You have been watching Robert Farah. This is Tea and Tarot, and I'll be back next week with more of this stuff. Bye for now.